The Ahsoka TV show released, and I had to catch up on the first 4 episodes because that's how long it took for me to realize the show had come out. And because I have some time to record, I thought I'd quickly make a script and just see what happens. Ahsoka is very much like every other Star Wars TV show besides Andor. As a matter of fact, Andor looks like Star Wars but does not feel like Star Wars. It's too good to be put in the same camp as the rest of the Star Wars TV shows and basically all the other Disney movies except Rogue One. Because I haven't talked about Star Wars before really in really any amount of depth, yes, Disney's done a terrible job with Star Wars and it's basically all of poor quality. Now, real quick, I'm writing this after episode 7 has come out, so there's still an episode left, and I may have to make some additions in the future while editing this. I doubt that episode will do anything to make me change my mind about this show, and it's definitely not going to fix all the problems that have come before the 7th episode, so I think I'm probably in the clear, but just thought I'd let you know. What was the first thing that stood out to me about Ahsoka? This is the first Star Wars TV show that has established characters that I didn't know. A bunch of them are from Rebels, which I have not watched. I know who Ahsoka is from the Clone Wars, and that's basically it. I've seen Ahsoka's fight with Vader from the Clone Wars and Obi-Wan's duel with Darth Maul. That is my knowledge of Rebels, so I can't tell you if this show is being consistent with Rebels. The next thing that stood out to me is this show moves at the pace of a slug. Ahsoka, I'm talking about the show, not the character, and that's going to make this very confusing to talk about. But Ahsoka is basically running on a treadmill. We have the illusion of moving forward, but not actually getting anywhere. Basically, most of what the show contains is bad video game-like fetch quests. A quick explanation of this would be a quest that makes you run to obtain items or go places just to lengthen the time of the quest. So many of these Star Wars TV shows have this kind of writing. In Ahsoka, we have to go find a item. The item gets taken after it's unlocked. The good men go to try and recover the item, and get lucky the information they have leads to the right place to find the bad men. They also get lucky and find the bad men leaving with the big hyperdrive. The good men put a tracker on the ship. Hopefully at this point you understand what I mean. And again, The Mandalorian is also guilty of this kind of writing as well. One thing that is strange to me about this show is why Thrawn is treated like some kind of magic figure. What made Thrawn so revered and probably the most famous or close to the top of the old expanded universe's most famous characters is the campaign this show is trying to bring about. Basically, Thrawn trying to put the pieces of Humpty Dumpty, the Empire, back together again. What has Thrawn done this time around to get such a reputation? I know he showed up in Rebels. I've not watched Rebels, so I don't really know what happened. And whatever happened, Thrawn ended up being in exile in a different galaxy. So why would what's ever left over of the Empire stick so many resources into getting Thrawn from this other galaxy? This show is taking the genius that is Thrawn in the books and expecting us to know about him and assume he's going to go on doing impressive feats. One more thing that includes Thrawn is everyone keeps saying if he comes back, a big war will happen. So why have we not heard about this before? The Star Wars timeline is further in the future than this show. It's almost like the Disney stuff they made didn't work out, and they had to go pillage the original trilogy. And that didn't work out, so now we're taking from the prequels and the expanded universe and the Clone Wars because there's no plan, and Star Wars fans will just eat up any old character that appears. Star Wars fans might be the most susceptible to nostalgia that I can think of any other piece of entertainment. Its fans will just cheer for any recognizable character, even though this character's arc is one they've already went through. And the Star Wars fans will just give it praise. Now, on to the thing this show has done that irritates me the most. This is episode 5 and Ahsoka's time in the world between worlds. Don't worry, I'll talk a bit about the world between worlds as a concept later. Ahsoka is brought to the world between worlds to be taught by Anakin about choosing between life and death. Also, Anakin says he'll finish her training. This whole episode seems to be trying to communicate through several ideas. I mentioned one, choosing between life and death, dealing with the realities of losing people under your command, and Ahsoka having to think about this line of Jedi that she's in, and their past failings, and the destruction it's caused. Also, Ahsoka's feelings about being a teacher of Sabine. The worst part about all of this is the episode doesn't answer any of these problems that it brings up. Now, MauLer made a great video on this episode talking about the life and death part of the episode and some more stuff. I don't think there's any reason for me to, go over what he talked about. I'll do the best I can to not, but I'll have to bring some of it up anyway. But I'll go on and cover the rest of the points that I had brought up. We see young Ahsoka in the Clone Wars, and she ends up next to a wounded clone trooper, and Ahsoka starts telling Anakin about how these clones were following her orders and she got them killed. Anakin says it's their job as Jedi to lead, and they both will make mistakes that cost lives, and Anakin agrees with Ahsoka that it weighs on him that people under his command die. Anakin also says the times, the Clone Wars, he needs to train Ahsoka differently to adjust to the Clone Wars. Ahsoka asks if that's all she will have to teach her own Padawan one day, which is how to fight. Anakin says teaching is not all it's cracked up to be. Ahsoka takes offense to this and asks Anakin to be more serious. Anakin says he's trying to teach Ahsoka to be a leader, and Ahsoka asks if she can stop fighting, and Anakin says she will die. This whole sequence is a lot like an episode of the Clone Wars. The first episode of the Ryloth arc, Anakin and Ahsoka have to break through a blockade of the planet. This is also Ahsoka's first time in command of a squad. What happens in this first attempt to break through the blockade? Ahsoka gets caught in a trap and disobeys orders and gets an entire Venator-class cruiser and most of her squad killed. This is what causes Ahsoka to ask the question about how to handle failure and loss. Anakin in this episode, taking one of the remaining Venators, a big ship, the cruiser, and flies it into the enemy's command ship, killing its commander. Anakin escapes via escape pod before the Venator makes impact with the ship. This is where Ahsoka steps up and she learns to deal with handling failure and loss because other people are counting on her to lead. Now, this episode is not perfect and is more about Ahsoka getting her confidence back rather than handling loss. But as far as being a confidence booster, it does seem to work. The thing I find so strange about this flashback in the Ahsoka show is this battle the show is showing us is a battle on Ryloth, and this must be after the space battle in the Clone Wars. The reason I think that this planet must be Ryloth is there's a bunch of Twi'leks standing and talking to Rex, and the planet has a lot of sand and desert on it, like Ryloth does as well. So this means Ahsoka didn't learn anything in that episode of the Clone Wars, and this probably happened a few days after that Clone Wars episode to begin with. What is also confusing, as far as the Ahsoka show is concerned, is we don't see Ahsoka lose anybody. She does not know what happened with Sabine because she fell off the cliff, and this episode does a few things that, at least to me, are out of character. First is when Ahsoka asks Anakin to be more serious. The entirety of the Clone Wars TV show, the dynamic between the two, it's a lot of jokes and a lot of sarcasm. Sure, there are serious moments between the two of them, and the episode that I just talked about has several. Then Hera asks Huyang about Anakin Skywalker, Ahsoka's master, and he says Anakin was very intense. I'm not quite sure that's how I would describe Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars. He was very relaxed, maybe too relaxed. Obviously, he was fighting a war, and that did require some level of intensity to survive. But when I think of an intense person, it would be someone who was much more serious than Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars. Ahsoka thinks because she fought in the Clone Wars and was in part trained to be a warrior, her part in this line is death and destruction. Something that confuses me is, yes, some of the Separatists in the Clone Wars were justified to want to leave the Republic, but many of the corporations that made up the Separatist Council that ran the war were evil and should have been fought against. When Ahsoka complains that her role is just death and destruction, it's confusing to me because on Ryloth, she was fighting to free the Twi'leks from Wat Tambor, the leader of the Techno Union and a member of the Separatist Council, who was mistreating the populace of Ryloth.
The Techno Union Army is at your disposal, Count.
And yes, there is death and destruction, but also good deeds that were done on Ryloth. When Anakin tells Ahsoka she has all the knowledge he possesses, like what he got from Obi-Wan, Ahsoka is concerned because Anakin fell to the dark side. But this is very strange because Ahsoka should have met Luke by this point, who should have told Ahsoka that Anakin killed the Emperor and did the right thing in the end. This should not even be coming up in this show right now. We should have seen Ahsoka talk to Luke about this, and he could have given her the answers. If you watched MauLers' video, yes, he covers this, but I also felt I needed to as well. I guess this episode we learned fighting is living. It's still not clear to me why Ahsoka would not want to fight. She seemed very focused on wanting to stop Thrawn's return. Ahsoka seems to want to stop Thrawn from coming back more than anyone. Sabine and Hera are more concerned with getting Ezra back. For the teaching part, this comes up very briefly in that Ryloth conversation where Ahsoka asks, what will she teach her Padawan? This is brought up, but not really answered. I think it's probably the question the show should have chosen to answer. Have Ahsoka talk with Force Ghost Anakin about training a Padawan. How did Anakin teach her because Ahsoka was also stubborn and didn't want to listen, pretty much like Sabine. Maybe have Anakin tell her what she told him after she escaped those Trandoshan hunters. So, if you haven't seen the Clone Wars, Anakin thought it was his fault that Ahsoka had got captured. Anakin blamed himself and thought he could have done more to help her.
Ahsoka, I am so sorry.
For what?
For letting you go. For letting you get taken. It was my fault.
Ahsoka tells Anakin it was his training that got her through the situation.
When I was out there, alone, all I had was your training and the lessons you taught me. And because of you, I did survive.
Anakin not only saved Ahsoka, but because of the training he gave her, she was also able to help others survive this situation as well.
And not only that, I was able to lead others to survive as well.
This would have made more sense because if Ahsoka thought she had failed at protecting and teaching Sabine, but this isn't the direction the show took. And this would also not be a retreading of old ground because Ahsoka has never had a Padawan, and this would be a new lesson for her and an interesting lesson from her own past, just from a different angle. What we got is a worse version of a Clone Wars episode. Now, something I've been thinking about for some time is how many modern pieces of entertainment take already established main characters, basically have that character go backwards in character growth, only to have this character basically relearn a lesson again to make it look like there has been character growth. In reality, there has not been any growth, just ground retread. This could be why so many modern shows feel like they're just treading water and don't really move forward. In this case, with Ahsoka, it's even worse because Dave Filoni is just reusing his own stuff. Ahsoka is Filoni's character, and how he can't come up with something new is a bit confusing to me. As a matter of fact, it's more half-baked than what he did previously. Something I thought that would have happened faster with Star Wars is how long it would take for Star Wars to take its force powers and technology to ridiculous levels. Stuff like time travel. I guess it took until The Last Jedi to break this with the whole hyperspace kamikaze attack. I guess there's also the Force Skype and projecting yourself like what Luke did. And The Rise of Skywalker had stuff like the Force teleportation and fighting outside of reality temporarily, or they were like teleporting. I'm not exactly sure what that power is. Now for something a bit more controversial. I don't think Dave Filoni has made anything good since being outside of George Lucas's control. I might be forgetting something, but I don't really like anything he's done, to my knowledge. I know people will say, what about the last season of the Clone Wars? I'm currently working on a video right now about the clones and inhibitor chips. And I guess I'll give you my quick answer. I don't like them. I know Dave Filoni made The World Between Worlds, which is basically Star Wars' method of time travel. Apparently, Filoni said it's not time travel, but if it works like time travel, sounds like time travel, and makes no sense, also is a cop-out for writing, it's probably time travel. I really have a hard time understanding the people who think Filoni will fix Star Wars. He's just not going to. As a matter of fact, he's been making it worse. I'm starting to think George Lucas was stopping the Clone Wars from going completely off the deep end. Or Disney ruined Filoni, but I think that's less likely. Also, now we have a new galaxy. Was the one we had before not enough? Does the classic Star Wars crawl need to change from a galaxy far, far away to galaxies far, far away? I guess after the Disney sequel trilogy used up the unknown regions, Disney just decided the next thing is a new galaxy. One thing George Lucas did with Star Wars was keep itself pretty constrained on what the Force was and what it can do. During everything George Lucas made, Force lightning is probably the craziest Force ability he came up with. I can't think of anything George Lucas made as far as Force abilities go that's just absolutely wild. Disney took a universe that was pretty restrained in powers and tech and took it to places it should never have gone. Is there anything I like about this show? I like how in the first fight between Baylan and Ahsoka, Baylan uses a knight style of fighting and Ahsoka uses a samurai style. I mean, the rest of the fight is not done very well, but I at least like that idea. I like that we've got more non-humans that are important characters and not just some alien in the corner of a cantina. Also, we've gotten more than just desert planets in Star Wars, but there still seem to be tons of planets that are just wasteland with nobody living on them. I mean, seriously, pretty much every location in these Star Wars TV shows is just in the middle of nowhere. I like the droid Hu Yang. I think he's probably my favorite character so far. And that's kind of interesting because in most Star Wars stuff, I don't ever really like the droid character, but I like him, so that's interesting. I like the idea of Baylan, but I just know so little about him, I can't say if I actually like his character. And honestly, that's about it. I guess I can wrap this up. Ahsoka is just more of the same from Star Wars. More bad writing, a lack of character development. If you've not watched any of the other shows with these characters in them, you have absolutely no idea who they are. The dialogue in this show is terrible, and this is most of what new Star Wars has given us. It's a complete mess. With everything people like about most of these shows being, I've seen this character before, that's cool, this show is great. For some reason, Star Wars fans have been given the reputation of being hard to please. And considering the recent Star Wars TV shows and some fans' reception to them, I have absolutely no idea why this is the case. I mean, it could be that Star Wars fans have been so traumatized that they will just accept anything at this point with nostalgia. It's kind of hard to tell. Honestly, I think this recording and writing went fairly well considering I wrote this in 2 evenings and am getting over a cold, so not bad.